Hey, Michael.
Hey, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
How's summer going?
Fast.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, but good.
We are live streaming, so everything you say and do will be recorded.
I figure iPhone time is probably most exact, right?
What's that?
I figure iPhone time is probably most exact.
Oh, yes.
Call the meeting to order as we please stand and face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you and welcome to the July meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Town of Lancaster. We have 2 items on the agenda tonight. Ms. Serrano, would you please take roll call?
Mr. Hain.
Here.
Ms. Monticelli.
Here.
Mr. Storr. Ms. Studley.
Here.
Mr. Tillmans.
Here.
Mr. Michaely.
Here. Thank you. Two items on the agenda tonight, 272 Erie Street and 28 St. Anthony Street. Ms. Serrano, would you please read the legal notice for 272 Erie Street?
The first case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Gerald and Deborah Litwiller, 272 Erie Street, Lancaster, New York, 14086, for 2 variances for the purpose of constructing a replacement barn on premises owned by the petitioners at 272 Erie Street, Lancaster, New York, to wit. A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 31, subsection C2A of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a replacement barn as an accessory to a single-family residence in a light industrial district. Chapter 400 zoning Section 31, subsection C2A of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires if a non-conforming use or structure is destroyed or damaged by fire, other casualty, act of God, or by the public enemy to the extent of less than 50% of its value immediately prior to the occurrence, it may thereafter be reconstructed or repaired and occupied. The petitioners therefore request a variance to allow the reconstruction of a single-family accessory structure in a light industrial district. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning Section 31, subsection C2B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a replacement barn at 2,576 square feet and 28 feet tall as an accessory structure to a single-family residence in a light industrial district. Chapter 400 zoning Section 31, subsection C2B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires non-conforming uses may be enlarged up to 25%, provided that no enlargement shall exceed 25% of the size of the use at the date the use was rendered non-conforming. The petitioners therefore request a variance to allow the enlargement of a non-conforming accessory structure to a single-family residence.
Thank you, Ms. Terranova. If there's anyone here from 272 Erie Street, please come up front to the podium. Tell us your name and address for the record.
My name is Gerald Litwiller. I live at 272 Erie Street in Lancaster, New York.
Hi. Thank you. Please tell us about your project.
Pardon me?
Please tell us a little something about your project.
The original structure that was there that was destroyed by fire was approximately 22 by 50. What we're proposing is to replace that with a 28 by 46 with a second floor and a 16 by 28 open carport. And that, because it was completely destroyed by fire, code enforcement indicated that we have to obtain this variance.
Okay.
I did talk to the immediate neighbors and provided them a drawing of what I was proposing, and no one objected, and you should have copies of their comments in there. It's set back from the road about 175 feet, and it's on the west boundary line, so it's nothing that is close to. The closest structure is probably across the street.
Got it. Thank you. And you did a great job with this. This was great. And I noticed that you did have the owner of that, including the owner would be most impacted by it. Let's say it's closest to the west side, and you had something from. You had all your neighbors. So great job with that. We'll go to the board for questions or comments.
No questions.
Questions, comments from Mr.
No
Ms.
questions.
Monticelli?
I just wanted to note for the record that we did get 5 letters attached to our paperwork from your neighbors, all of them saying that they didn't object. Linda, is it Baird?
Bain.
Bain,
Okay.
yes.
And John Garvey at 262, say no objections to my wonderful neighbor. I'm sorry, I can't read the names, but Richard at 282 says all good. I see no problems. Phil and Bear Stoka say at 285 say no objection to the above building. Max Weber and Megan Satchett, 269 Erie, no issues at all. And the last one, Richard, looks like Cropper, sorry, 261 Erie Street, it will be fine. So thank you for doing that. That's very helpful to us. And I have no questions about your petition. I'm just wondering, maybe for the town clerk or the town attorney or the building inspector, who is this public enemy of which we speak? From the paperwork.
It says if a non-conforming use or structure is destroyed or damaged by fire, other casualty, act or God, or by the public enemy.
I've never heard that term before,
It's in the code.
but
An evil world.
I take it that wasn't the case.
Hopefully it doesn't come up. Ms. Dudley, any questions?
No.
Questions? Here, anyone in the audience have any comments on this? No, hearing none. Do we have a motion from the board?
I will. I'll make the motion. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings: that no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that no detriment to nearby properties will be created by the granting of the area variance relief sought, that the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicants to pursue other than the area variance relief sought, that the requested area variance relief is not substantial, that the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district, that the alleged difficulty is self-created but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought, that this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if variance relief sought is granted, as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant, that within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Monticelli, second by Ms. Dudley. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hain.
Yes.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes.
Ms. Dudley.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Chairman Whiteley.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Your petition, your variance has been approved. Please make sure to stop in with the building department before doing any work.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a good night. Good job with those letters.
I wanted to everybody know exactly what that was going on.
Good, thank you. Ms. Terranova, could we please read the legal notice for the next case?
The second case considered by the Zoning Board of Appeals is that of the petition of Keith and Emily Junick, 28 St. Anthony Street, Lancaster, New York, 14086, for 2 variances for the purpose of constructing a shed on premises owned by the petitioners at 28 St. Anthony Street, Lancaster, New York, to wit: A variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a shed on a public drainage easement. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires no structures other than fencing allowed within any drainage access easement. The petitioners therefore request a 7-foot, 10-inch variance. B, a variance from the requirements of Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster. The request calls for constructing a shed 2 feet, 2 inches from the rear property line. Chapter 400 zoning, Section 14, subsection D, Schedule B of the Code of the Town of Lancaster requires a minimum location of an accessory structure of 5 feet from a lot line, or if an easement exists, from the edge of the easement, whichever is more restrictive. The petitioners therefore request a 2-foot, 10-inch variance.
Thank you, Ms. Terranova, and if there's anyone here from 48 St. Anthony, please come on up. Hi.
Hello, Keith and Emily Junick from 28 St. Anthony Street.
Thank you. So I know you were here last year, but why don't you tell us about this project?
Yes, the entire project began last year with a pool. We came in here for a variance to front yard variance and a fence variance. The entire project has taken on a life of its own. Over that time, they dug the pool just as winter came, and then we spent the entire winter kind of with a shed and with a in-ground pool dug, but no fence and everything. So as we have moved along, we have everything kind of set. The concrete went in, and one of the building codes, the fence went up, and one of the building code guys came by and told us that our shed was not proper. It's a complete, I think, ignorance here. And I know that that's not an excuse by any means, but we're under the assumption that 5 feet from our property was our neighbor's fence line, which we now know he was well inside the property line. We were also under the assumption that if we did not pour a concrete pad for our shed and it was movable, that that would allow us to be in the easement. We obviously know now that that was a mistake on our part. The shed, the concrete, the pool, the fence are all finished now, but obviously that is not in code, so we are here today to plead for
To keep it there.
to keep it where it is. That's the story. I don't know if it matters. We did have a friend of a friend is a civil engineer who wrote us a short letter that just explains that he thought, after looking through everything, that the drainage would not be an issue. I don't know if that's something that I can give you or
You can
look
pass it
at.
around. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I don't know if that's really, I mean, we're, again, ignorant to the easement and the storm drain, but if that is one of the catches, I suppose we brought that. So.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask a question first, and Matt, you may want to jump in at some point. I believe that the easements, I'm sorry, the variances you applied for last year were for the fence, because it's a side yard, pretty much, into the front yard.
Corner lot, yeah.
The corner lot, and the pool itself. Were either, I don't remember, I thought that is the fence in the drainage easement?
The fence is in the drainage easement.
And was that part of the
The variance?
variance?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
We signed a letter saying that we understood that if they needed to get in.
Okay, so you already did that part of it, okay.
Yep.
And so the pool and the shed, and I drove by your house and I saw the backyard, I didn't obviously go in, but the shed, which is existing already, is it right up against the fence?
It is connected, the fence butts up to the back end of the shed.
Okay.
On both sides.
Okay,
It is in a corner that is on the opposite of our neighbor's fence, or our neighbor's shed. Anyway,
So like
we
the two
put it
sheds
there
are back
thinking
to
that.
back, so we wouldn't have to stare at
But-
each other's sheds, was the idea.
but the fence is blocking it anyway, isn't it? Isn't the fence,
Well,
it's on your side, the shed is obviously, it's on your side of the fence, right?
Yes.
So
well, just like the structure.
the tops block each other then, okay, okay. I have no more questions, go to the board. Ms. Hain?
I have no questions.
Mr. Terranova? I'm sorry, I said, look at you, I said Ms. Terranova, Ms. Monticelli. I'm getting so old. Ms. Monticelli.
The neighbors to your rear, where their fence is, have you discussed this with them? The shed is up, correct?
The neighbors to the rear have seemingly not been very interested in having a conversation.
There was the conversation that tried to happen that was not received by them very well, in which he stormed off and screamed at him, and I was like, so.
But that conversation is a little different in that the original plan was to create a fence that went to their fence. There was a misunderstanding where, and again, I thought that their fence was their fence line, so that was a misunderstanding that he actually owns 2 feet behind his fence, so when we were talking about doing that, he got very upset that we were encroaching on his property. Since then, we have not spoken. I've kind of just tried to lay low. And again, it's not his fault, it's my fault. I just assumed that that was the property line. And so we have not spoken to him, other than to say that our sheds are in line with each other. That makes sense. So from his shed, you don't really see ours, and from our shed, you don't really see his, kind of the way it's lined up.
Do you have any idea how, excuse me, how far the backs of the 2 sheds are? How far apart they are?
I would tell you that I would say that they're between 13 and 18 feet.
Okay. All right. So that's not a problem, yeah, as long as, okay. All right. Thank you. We do have the letter from the attorney, Jason Denyu, and he says he doesn't see a problem. But normally,
Civil engineer, sorry, not an attorney.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Normally, when someone puts something in an easement and we approve the variance, it's with the condition that they sign something saying that in the event that the town needs to get access, you will be responsible for moving the shed at your own expense.
That's kind of what we thought we were doing by not pouring the concrete pad to begin with. We assumed that that was our
Yeah,
responsibility. So that's not-
yeah, you still need a variance, and the only way the variance would be granted is if it's movable, so you did good. Just didn't know about the
We did
variance.
good, but we did something.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Terranova. Ms. Dudley?
I do not have any questions.
Mr. Tillman?
I have no other questions.
Matt, would you care to step in here or give, so let me ask this question. Was the fence, because your street, as opposed to a lot of our streets, it creates almost an alleyway behind everyone's fence, which
Yeah.
is if they're, because of the drainage easements. So was this fence erected where it was supposed to be erected? Where we gave the variance for?
Yes.
Okay.
See, fence encroachments into an easement are administratively approved through our town engineer
Oh,
to simply verify whether or not the post structure is going to impact the pipe that's within that drainage easement.
right.
So the authorization was made. Now, what you were granting variance for the fence, if I'm not mistaken, was the height
We granted, yes, because we are in
The height
a
is
corner
6
lot.
foot?
within the front yard setback area. That's what the request for variance was.
And they were able to put it into the drainage easement?
This is
even though-
correct, based upon the town engineer's review of the location of the fence with respect to the infrastructure below grade.
Okay. But now a shed is,
Shed is a structure which is not permitted. The fence is the only thing that's permitted through review of the town engineer.
okay,
A shed is typically not permitted within the drainage easement for two reasons. One, it's an obstruction to the easement and access needs to be gained, and this is why we request the deed restriction of the removal of the structure at the owner's expense if the town should get through. Secondly, with these permanent structures within a drainage easement, the swales typically get filled with a level concrete pad or what have you, landscaping, whatever it is, and it reduces the capacity of the swale to the 10-year storm design for that swale.
right.
In this instance, I'm not sure whether or not we have a pad. I can't even recall, to be honest with you. I'm just thinking it's a post and beams so the water can pass.
There's not a pad.
No pad at all, just concrete blocks.
Blocks, and it's an elevated structure, so the capacity has not been impeded in the swale, which is fine. So, if you so choose, the deed restriction has to be filed
Right.
so that it can follow the land and any subsequent owners, that they understand moving that shed is the owner's responsibility and expense should the town have to pass through that easement.
Right, so did you get this, so the last part of what Matt said is important. Did you have to do that with the last one as well?
We had to do that with the fence.
With the fence, and was it recorded?
It was.
It was.
The fence encroachment agreement, because of the expense, is not as vital.
Okay.
It's simply a document that acknowledges that a fence would need to be removed.
So in this
Moving a
case,
building is substantial.
right, so in this case, we have an agreement which if this, the only way, I would never say yes to this at all if it was not for, you would have to, I ask you every month what this is called, an encroachment agreement?
It's an encroachment agreement between the town of Lancaster and the property owner.
And it would have to be recorded. You would have to be responsible for recording that with the county. In essence, it's giving us permission that you have to move it if necessary, or if not, the town moves it, correct?
If
At the owner's expense, right?
And that follows the home, so anyone you sell your house to, it
Stays on the
is
deed.
recorded in your deed, and it would follow the owner.
So if the highway department needs to get back there, we need to move the shed, or it's going to be destroyed, all of it at our expense.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That is
That's
what
kind
we
of
assumed
Yeah.
in ignorance, again, I say, when we kind of started the process.
So let's get to that question too. Why did you put it there? Is there, because I know you want to block the view of the other, was there somewhere you could have put it that would not be in this drainage easement and you wouldn't have to be here now?
There probably would have been that if we would have kind of thought through the process earlier. We have since put the pool in, put all the concrete down, put in a fence, and so now there really is nowhere else to move it to that isn't also,
Because it has to be 5 feet and then 10 feet from the pool, so it's
so we built it based on thinking, on bad thoughts.
thinking that we were
Right,
where we needed to be.
Mistakes.
okay. Do we have any more questions from the board? The audience? Nobody in the audience? There is none. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. Whereas the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Lancaster has made the following findings. That no undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood by granting the area variance relief sought. That no detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting of the area variance relief sought. That the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicants to pursue other than the area variance relief sought. That the requested area variance relief is not substantial. That the proposed area variance relief will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district. That the alleged difficulty is self-created, but not to the extent necessary to preclude the granting of the area variance relief sought. That this board has taken into consideration the benefit to the applicants if the variance relief sought is granted as weighed against the detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood or community by such grant. That within the intent and purposes of this ordinance, the variance relief sought, if granted, is the minimum variance necessary to afford relief.
I'll second that.
Do we need a condition?
Oh, I'm sorry, let's and add the condition.
And that is also with the condition that you will get, you will go down to the county and have the, what was the correct verbiage?
Encroachment agreement?
Easement agreement added to the deed.
I'll second that.
Do we have a form that they send?
Yeah, we'll present them, we'll give them the form, right? And it's worth pointing out to the board that we have, this board is a, in order for anything to pass in this board or any board, there has to be a majority of the, I'm having a hard time with phrases today, constituted board, which means 4 votes. We have 5 people here. It needs 4 votes to pass. I'll second. Roll call vote, please. Turn over motion by Ms. Studley and second by me.
Got it. Mr. Hain.
Yes, with the condition of the deed encroachment agreement.
Ms. Monticelli.
Yes.
Ms. Studley.
Yes.
Mr. Tillmans.
Yes.
Chairman Mikely.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been approved. This is what I normally say, stop in with the building department before starting any work. Just go home.
How do we get the, do we just
Oh, I'm sorry, you will have to go to the building department for that,
This
yes.
is an example.
First, my recommendation is to have your real estate attorney speak with the town attorney's office to draft the document for signatures, not only by yourself, but the town supervisor, so that that document could be filed down at Erie County Hall.
Okay, so
Once
my
that's
attorney
complete,
deals with their.
That's correct.
This attorney. Okay.
Once that's complete, we'll receive a copy of the filing, and we can issue the building permit or allow the continuance of shed construction
Fair.
or get you your yard put back together.
So this won't end until that's done. This is not
It won't
over
be
yet.
official until that's
Yeah,
done,
yeah.
but we can start that tomorrow.
Take this just as.
It's kind of a
Is that a draft?
prototype.
I'm sorry?
It's a prototype.
Oh, that's, okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Doesn't apply exactly to your situation, but
Yes.
similar.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you, good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board before we adjourn? Nope. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Moved. Seconded.
Yeah.
We have 3 cases for next month.
3?
Yes.
Good.
Great.
I had meant to earlier, just remind everyone, whenever there's only like 5 people here, it gets a little dicey.